It's the Jack and Joe show. It's probably coming off the back of one of the craziest games of football I've personally seen. Joe Sansom, how did you feel about the game at Anfield?
Great game. Almost the polar opposite of the Arsenal game in terms of how exciting it was to watch. I would say, despite the circumstances, it's a better result than the Arsenal game. But let's face it, I mean, I think the last time we spoke, Jack, was before the double header at home of Brighton and Arsenal. And I was saying, I'd absolutely snap your hand off for 4 points. We got it. To then follow that up with a point at Anfield, and I know we'll speak about the circumstances that surrounded that, just brilliant. And the fact that we've gone unbeaten in that tough stretch of games that you did call out, and fair play to you, Jack, a while ago, even before Wolves, that you don't fear anyone. This is why, because we can mix it with the very best in this league, and just shows what a fantastic job Marco Silva's done when you take into account the team news that we had going into this game.
Absolutely. We were sort of threadbare, especially at the back. But the thing is, there's been no proof. You know how like sometimes you're missing your two best centre-backs, therefore we have to play our two second choice centre-backs. And that brings in a lot of worry and anxiety. But the thing is, nothing about any of Diop's or Cuenca's performances already this season left me feeling like I think this is going to be the reason why we're going to lose this game. It's genuinely like there's no real difference from having Diop and Cuenca to having Bassi and Anderson, in my opinion, where like I would argue that Diop's had probably a better season than maybe Bassi so far this season.
Yeah,
and I'd argue that Cuenca hasn't obviously been put a foot wrong either in any of the games he's played. So I wasn't actually feeling like, oh gosh, now Diop and Cuenca are starting, I think things are going to go. They were genuinely brilliant on the day, and it doesn't surprise me. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I was nervous of going into the game was just the fact that Cuenca would be on the side where Salah is. And I was thinking, you can have a fantastic game going up against a player like Salah, and in that one moment, like we basically saw for the equaliser, he can just create something out of nothing. Just that one moment of quality. But I thought he stood up really well. I mean, if you're being really harsh, he got done a bit for the equaliser, but I think that was more good play from Jota than it was anything bad from Cuenca. I thought it was a great performance, really, really composed on the ball. Another fantastically solid game for Diop. And we're now in a situation where Bassi is back from suspension going into Southampton game. We're not sure when Anderson's back, but Silva basically thought it would be by the end of the month. So that sort of screams it will be between this Southampton or the Bournemouth game in a week after's time. I think Diop in particular does not deserve to get dropped. And I think that if Anderson is back for Southampton, we'll go into team news more later, but I think that Anderson should start on the bench. I think it would be very, very harsh to drop Diop. It was already quite harsh to drop him at the start of the season. We all understood why. Anderson is better on the ball. But defensively, I've got to say this season, I don't think there's been much between them. And if anything, Diop's been better. Bassi and Cuenca's a bit of a stranger one because from what we've seen from Cuenca so far, and it is a small sample size, I think he's much better than Bassi on the ball. And I think it's like a comfortable difference, almost the same difference as Anderson to Diop. I'm interested in the balance that we'd want. So, for example, if you've got Diop, would you want a Cuenca on the other side? If you've got Bassi, would you want Anderson on the other side? Almost the one position being the more ball-playing role. And we obviously saw that on the weekend at Anfield. Really great performance from him. And I would not have any qualms at all if the starting centre-back pairing against Southampton is the same that we saw at Anfield. But it's a great position that we're in where currently, other than maybe feeling, such and such was a bit hard done by, there's not a single centre-back that could start on Sunday that I would think, wish he wasn't starting, wish it was X player instead. And that's really a relief because let's face it, when we all saw Anderson go down and trudge off against Wolves, and we saw the next four fixtures, we saw Tottenham, Brighton were in fantastic form at that point as well. And we know they're a good team. Arsenal and Liverpool, and we're thinking, he's probably going to miss those games minimum. The fact that Diop has come in and done so well, and then Cuenca's filled in for Bassi after that 5 yellow card suspension, is testament to both of them. I do think that, I'm sorry, I've been rambling for ages, but Berger and Lukic both provide great protection in front of them. I'm not sure how different it would be if it was only one of them. But I've loved what I've seen. I think that, for example, when it was just Berger due to Lucas's suspension against Brighton, we were a little bit more exposed at the back. But I've just absolutely loved what I've seen from Diop since he's come in. And I couldn't praise him high enough for what I've seen. I think that he's dealt with some fantastic forwards and made some of them look very, very irrelevant in the grand scheme of things in terms of stature, poise on the ball, any sort of clear-cut chances. He's cut out everything aerially and on the floor as well. So I want to see Diop start. And then, to be honest, I'm more than happy to see Cuenca keep his place, because what a place to go and have your full Premier League debut.
Yeah.
And let's face it, we see some sarcastic things at times. I've said it myself about the Anfield atmosphere. And that second half, Jack, I think we both agreed. Me from a dodgy stream, you from being there in the main stand. It felt like they were trying to suck the ball in. And that's an intimidating atmosphere to be in when it becomes a sort of cauldron of noise. A lot of stadiums can be like that. It's not just Anfield, but for him to stand up, be counted, and in injury time, put in some great blocks. Well done, Cuenca.
Absolutely. I said it on the podcast, but I'll just sort of double down on it. At times in that second half, you're at a game, you're at a Premier League game, and you're experiencing a Premier League atmosphere, and it's very, very casual, and it's very, very not very. I felt uncomfortable at times at Anfield on Saturday. Uncomfortable because it doesn't matter whether they're down to 9 men or 8 men or 10 men. The fans just seem to lift the whole team when they've got the ball, when they turn it around and come again for another attack, when they get a throw in or a corner. It was relentless, and the relentless nature of it came because they were chasing the game, but yet they were still down to 10 men, and they still had this expectation that we are going to get something from the game. Then you throw into the fact that they're top of the league, and this is their big chance to win the title under Arne Slot. I found it really uncomfortable, and my head was spinning throughout the whole game. I don't think I've ever tweeted as much as I have during a game, because so much happened. It felt like every attack, something meaningful was going on. There's even instances in the first half and the second half where Fulham came forward and it was just the final ball. There was an opening run for Harry Wilson, and if someone got their head up, I can't remember who played the pass in the end. If he was found, he would have been clean through on goal in the box with a shot to take at goal. Extraordinary game. Just going back to the centre-back situation, I actually would really prefer if Anderson doesn't start on Saturday, due to the fact that there's just no point rushing him back and putting him in for the sake of putting him in. I think that would just be counterintuitive. We've got 3 other centre-backs who are so comfortable and good at this level. I can't quite remember a time. Obviously, Tim Ream's been fantastic for Fulham, and always was, where I've had 4 centre-backs with just so much belief in them. And we know Diop is susceptible to making mistakes because he's done it before. But I think it's this sort of belief that Marco instills in him over the last year or so, where, okay, he came off, I think since that Brentford mistake he made at the beginning of last season, hasn't really put many a foot wrong on a football pitch. He does look a little bit shaky on the ball sometimes when he's getting pressed, and that's fine because that's just the nature of the beast. But the nature of the beast being a pressing team, a very aggressive pressing team in Ipswich when we played them, that seemed to cast back my memory to that particular moment, that particular game. But I just feel very comfortable. And this is like the 4th season in a row now where I've been like, this is the best period of supporting Fulham, where it was under Marco Silva in the Championship. And then the first season in the Premier League, I was like, this is the best it's ever been. And then last season, it was like, well, this is even better. And I'd even say now, these last 4 games, the way we've performed, the way we've approached these games, the way we've performed within them, scored goals, take on the opponents, this is the best it's been I can remember since Europa League days, because we've scored in 15 consecutive games. There seems to be this weird pattern where we're scoring in very similar minutes to games. There's also a similar pattern of, you highlighted it on Twitter, of where we're conceding goals as well, just straight after the half, which I would have to say is the probably one negative about this Fulham team right now. But it's extraordinary how we're going to places like Anfield, and we're hosting Arsenal, and we're going to the Etihad, and there's not this like, well, we'll just take what we can get. It's like, well, no, we're actually going to bring the game to you. We're actually going to cause you problems by taking the lead. In all 3 of those games, we've taken the lead and caused problems to those teams. And it just goes back to the point I made 3-4 weeks ago. I don't fear games anymore. We could be playing against Classic 11, i.e., FIFA 09, Classic 11, World 11. And I'd be like, yeah, I reckon Iwobi's going to get one. I reckon Robinson's going to put a cross in. We're going to get a goal. It's genuinely extraordinary. There's been a lot of chat on Twitter, which has actually quite irritated me. And I know you're very aware of this because I've mentioned it every day since. Lots of pessimism about this Southampton game because of the nature of their position and then what we've done. And there's this whole feeling of a Fulhamish feeling where things are going to go wrong. I just don't understand why you don't have full confidence that this team can absolutely go and wipe the floor with Southampton. That should be the attitude, really. Joe, can I ask you a question? What did you make of the match of the day analysis of the Andy Robertson red card? Because in my opinion, all day long, it's a red card. From his first touch, where he gets it wrong and he wipes out Wilson, there's no question. So why is it under so much scrutiny?
It's very simple why it's under so much scrutiny, and I completely agree with you, and it's the team that it was for. If that's a Fulham player... Sorry if you can hear me barking. I think my puppy is also fuming at Gary Lineker. So I think the reason that the analysis was like that is very simple, and I completely agree with you, Jack, and it's just because of the team that the red card was against, and that is Liverpool. If that was a Fulham player, I don't think there's anything made of this. It is a clear last man challenge. I think it's irrelevant that the ball falls to Jimenez because ultimately Wilson was running through on goal and we did not score. And I know that shouldn't be relevant, but it is because, for example, let's say Jimenez slots that away. I think that it's probably pulled back for a yellow card because of the rule where I completely forget the name of it now, where it's almost like you don't get double the punishment. Double jeopardy, that's it. Because, it wasn't in the box for a start, so maybe that would only be the case if it was in the box. But ultimately, it shouldn't matter because Robertson has completely fluffed the challenge after a bad touch. And you will notice that Arne Slot came out after the game and said there was no issue with the red card for me. The only thing they were checking was the offside. I think that in itself should be enough reason for people like Big Jugs Lineker to realise that, it is not an error by the referee. And he was saying the game's gone silly and things like that. Waste of time. Look, one thing about this red card is that it galvanised Liverpool, unfortunately, and they got actually a lot better after it. Before that, we were really wiping the floor with them in transition. We struggled a little bit more afterwards. There was some amazing analysis from Thierry Henry and Jamie Carragher last night on Monday Night Football at the time of filming about how Slot changes tactics and basically used Gravenberch, who was fantastic as a centre-back, didn't make any substitutions, sort of kept on the front foot. But then the second half, when we went 2-1 up, used Gravenberch as almost like a decoy midfielder to bypass our midfield completely because they were outnumbered there anyway, which allowed them to pass the ball through to Nunez, played it off to Jota for the equaliser. Very interesting. I thought that Slot coached them very well. The crowd were up for it. There was almost a sense of... they wanted justice, even though, it was a red card. When you're down to 10 men, regardless of it, you want to, make a difference for the team. And I do think they did that. And I think that Liverpool were very worthy of a point, to be honest with you. I think that a point was a fair result on the balance of play. I would have loved to see a little bit more bravery towards the start of the second half from Fulham. But ultimately, when a goal goes in so early, and I think this is the time to talk about it, Jack, like you said, I tweeted it. The last 5 games we've played, we've had 4 good results, and we obviously had the Wolves debacle. But in all of those 5 games, we've let in a goal just after half-time. Against Wolves, 53rd minute. Tottenham, 54th minute. Brighton, 56th minute. Saliba last week on the 52nd, and Gakpo the earliest at the 47th. We also had, earlier in the season, the Man City one, straight after half-time from Kovacic. I believe there were some other examples slightly later in the half, such as Villa. Newcastle was probably the quickest of them all. What was that about 30 seconds into the half? Yeah, great example. One I forgot. There's a drop-off there. And it's strange because last season under Silva, I felt we often came out flying after half-time. So very interesting that's been the case. Need to start rectifying that versus Southampton on Sunday. Would have loved to see a bit more bravery. Like I said, I think the only negative for me, Jack, was the occasion that you mentioned where the final ball was off because there were so many chances on the counter-attack that we had. And I think that we weren't quite at our best going forward. And if we were, I think we'd have potentially scored more than 2 on the weekend. I loved what I saw from the chance that we did create. I think it was Smith Rowe that you mentioned earlier when you couldn't find the name, that overhit a pass through to Wilson. But there were some in the first half as well, where it was either Jimenez or Iwobi or even Pereira, who had a good game. He's suspended now, but merited his starting 11 place. I think that you'd mentioned that last week. You wanted him to play because of the game plan, and you were spot on. It was the same as Man City. So against Southampton, Jack, I don't know what we should change, but what I don't want to change is the way we started the game, because I thought we started like a house on fire. And I agree with you wholeheartedly that we shouldn't be fearing Southampton. I get why people are. The title of the channel is Fulhamish, and this happens to many teams. I'm sure that there's even a couple of less confident Liverpool fans that know they're playing Southampton in the semi-final and are thinking, is this a bit more of a banana skin now? I doubt there's as many as there are Fulham fans because of what's happened previously with us. But if we turn up, we will beat them. It's as simple as that. We are a better side than them. It was the same last year with Burnley, I admit, around the same time, nearly a year to the day. We didn't turn up. They played better than us. But if we turn up, we will win this game. The Wolves result was a freak result. And even then, it should have been probably a 2-1 game. It was, it wasn't a battering. The mitigating circumstance with Anderson going off, which is unbelievable finishing on the day from some of their forward players and midfielders. I'm confident going into Southampton game, and why not? Because we're 8th in the table. There was a brief moment yesterday when we were 7th, fleeting, I admit. But we've gone up from 10th to 8th in the table on the weekend that the teams around us had easier games on paper, and we went to Anfield. So now we've got the easier game on paper. We need to take advantage. And we've got a good run of fixtures coming up. Chelsea away aside, who I don't fear. I think it's going to be the toughest game of this run, obviously. But I don't fear them. I think that we can go there and get something playing like this. This is the chance to make a mark. This is a chance to zoom up the table a little bit more. And, this is a team that could get Europe. If things go our way, we could get Europe. And I'm looking ahead to this run of fixtures, and this is the time that we need to make sure we're not having games like the West Ham, the Everton games, dare I say, even the Liverpool game just gone in terms of the late equaliser. There's games that we should be seeing out. But I'm very confident. And the performance against Liverpool is why, because like you say, Jack, it was an intimidating atmosphere. It was a pinball moment at 2-2 where I honestly think Fulham of last year and the year before concede, where there was about 3 block shots in a minute, and then Diaz's one was deflected just over. Felt like the ball was being sucked in. It felt like it was a matter of time. We broke and nearly won it ourselves. It's just a team that doesn't give up, a team that gives anyone a game. And yes, they were down to 10 men and we led twice. I fully appreciate that. But you have to remember, this is a team that battered City and Real Madrid within a few days of each other.
They're the best team in the world.
This is the best team in the world, probably currently. Best club team in the world, especially on form. And the times that they've dropped points this season, away to Arsenal, fair enough. Away to Newcastle in unfortunate circumstances with the error leading to goal. At home to Forest in a bit of a fluke game, if we're being honest. But Forest have been very good this season. They sit in 4th right now. That's it. That's the final list of games they drop points in other than against us. So I am very, very proud of this team. And to put in that performance with someone making their full debut at centre-half is just wonderful. Without one of your starting wingers in Reece Nelson, well done to us.
Honestly, we are a very, very, very good team. Within that moment you spoke about with the block shots and the pinball scramble, I've never felt more paralysed watching a game of football where I genuinely could not move. It felt like an age where that ball was bouncing around the box, and obviously we managed to get away with one there, and some fantastic play. Obviously, we went hard on Robinson on the podcast, so there's no need to reiterate it. But what a performance from Robinson up and down the pitch!
Unbelievable. I want to point out actually one thing I haven't seen mentioned much is, or haven't seen mentioned enough, is he always performs well against Liverpool. He did really well there at Anfield last year when we lost 4-3. It was a record number of interceptions, I believe, in a Premier League game against Salah. Salah didn't score in that game. That's now 3 games in a row in the league. That's 5 if you include the 2 League Cup games last season that Salah hasn't scored against us, which is incredible when you think of how prolific he is. The game before that was a penalty, fair enough. The game before that was quite a scrappy goal at the Cottage. So, brilliant that we're keeping him quiet. And Robertson has just been insane again. And I am getting nervous, but I don't think we'll let him go in January.
There's no... We just
There's
can't.
No benefit.
We can't afford it. Yeah,
no.
And his price would still be the same in the summer. Do you know what is really interesting? That I've been thinking about this a lot actually last few days. When you think of teams at home and you think of their stadium and when they play at home being considered a fortress, the characteristics and the traits you need for that to be the case is for things to happen at home on a consistent level where it's almost an expectation of that to happen, and then it does happen. I am now saying that Craven Cottage is a fortress. And the reason I'm saying that is, in every single home game this season, bar one in Brentford, where we still won, we scored first in the first half down the Putney end. It feels like every home game has molded into one game, and I'm watching the same thing happen over and over again. And when I say those words, they are connotated or correlated to negatives. I'm seeing the same thing over and over again. We're conceding this goal. I'm saying this in the positive light. We're scoring goals at the Putney end. Because I'm sat very fortunately in the Johnny Haynes in a very sort of similar position every single week, as you would be in your season ticket seat, as anyone would be in their season ticket seat. It feels like I'm watching the same thing happen over and over again, whether it be Jimenez's goals or Iwobi's goals or Smith Rowe's goals. I think he's only scored one actually, but Smith Rowe. But it feels like the first half of games at Craven Cottage are just so samey, and samey being a good thing because we're scoring and we're taking the lead. And obviously, we scored against Wolves and we went on to lose. We scored first against Villa and we went on to lose. But we're still getting it's even stuff like, we scored in the 11th minute against Arsenal and the 11th minute against Liverpool. These patterns that are happening where Fulham are actually, so there's obviously a game plan. There's obviously a way we want to attack. There's obviously a way we want to hurt the opposition. But these things are coming off. And even then, we still will sit here and talk about those individual games that I've just listed off. Those games where we scored first. We could have scored more in that first half. We should be 2 up. We should be 3 up. It's incredibly encouraging. And now we're hosting a team in Southampton who are the worst in the league. They're on lower points right now than Derby were at this stage in 07-08 when they went down on 11 points. They've just set their manager in Russell Martin. I don't actually know, because obviously they play tomorrow night against Liverpool, what the style of play will be. Are they going to just stick with Martin's erratic playing out from the back? And that's basically what's got them into so much trouble already this season. Obviously, we scored in our this home game before last from pressing, and that seems like a very Southampton thing to do, of which Brighton did to us with Verbruggen. But it feels like, and I've said it since the Wolves game, which actually ironically went the other way. I felt like a thrashing is on the cards at some point. I think Southampton will obviously want to shut up shop, obviously, because they want to. They'll probably come to the Cottage looking to take a point and build on that within the league. But I do think we could, if we're absolutely on it, like a car bonnet, we could take them to the cleaners. But that's very easy for me to say. But you do get scenarios like this where they just get a lift. Tyler Dibling's a very, very good player. Adam Armstrong, very good player. Cameron Archer. Like, these are what's frustrated me. And sorry, Joe, I did my in profile of Southampton yesterday, and I looked at their squad, and obviously you look at their results. They've actually got a fairly okay looking squad, not brilliant, but still quite capable at this level. The midfield options they've got in Flynn Downs, Will Smallbone, obviously he's been out injured. They had Fernandez, they had Alcaraz as well. So, I mean, they've got some really good options. But what's happened is that the defence this season for Southampton, with Dale Stephens getting red carded twice this season already, and the way they're playing out from the back, and they have 4 different goalkeepers play this season, their defence has completely let them down. When actually now they've got a player in Tyler Dibbling who's looking like one of the biggest stars emerging in the Premier League because of the way he plays, the way he dribbles. And it's a shame that Southampton are going to basically, I think they'll be relegated and they'll have to start again next season. But I know what fans mean when they say they're fearing this game, but I just think if we're on our game and the way we take the game to teams at Craven Cottage, I think we could really have a field day here, Joe.
This episode of Fulhamish is brought to you by NordVPN, which is the tool I use to watch all the festive football by changing the location of either my tablet, my laptop, or my phone. It is particularly perfect for those 3 p.m. kickoffs which aren't available here in the UK. All you need to do is go to NordVPN, change the location of your laptop or whatever device you're using, and then you can access platforms which are not only much cheaper than those here in the UK, they also show all the games, unlike what we have, where we only get a fraction of them. It means that I can watch every single Fulham game, whether it's on the telly or not. I also use NordVPN in order to access cheaper flights and hotels, as quite often, switch your location, and you'll find those become a bit less expensive as well. You can use NordVPN on up to 10 devices, so I share my login with friends, family, and colleagues. And right now, you can get a great deal by going to nordvpn.com/Fulhamish. Not only will you get to access a great rate, but you get 4 extra months as well, and it's completely risk-free thanks to Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. So to get that great rate plus 4 extra months, go to nordvpn.com/Fulhamish. That's nordvpn.com/Fulhamish.
I really agree with you. I don't see them keeping us out because we've scored in every single game this season by United away. Obviously, that means we've scored in every single home game. And I would be disappointed if we let one into them. We haven't kept a clean sheet at home yet. That's one thing I'd love us to do. A couple away, obviously. I'm going through our home games now as you were mentioning them. So obviously, let's just look at the first halves, like you were mentioning. So Leicester halftime score was 1-1, but we probably dominated that game. West Ham was 1-0, should have been more. Newcastle was 2-0, should have been more. Villa was 1-1, probably one of our worst halves of the season, but still a 1-1, and when it should have been 2-1 up with the penalty. Brentford, the only one where we were losing, 1-0 down, and had absolutely dominated that. Brentford had 2 shots, one being the worldie, one deflected wide. We should have scored at least 2 in that first half. Wolves, 1-1, not that bad. Brighton was obviously 1-0, and Arsenal was 1-0. So in every single game bar Brentford, we were at least drawing at half-time. In all of those, bar Villa, we should have been leading. It's just an incredible inevitability about starting the game off right. So if you can fix up the 2 periods late on in games, we've actually scored more late on in games than we've conceded, which is something that goes unnoticed. We've scored 8, let in 7, I think, in the last 15 minutes of games. I mean, when you take into account a few of those are the clincher, as in the Harry Wilson goal against Palace, the Reece Nelson goal against Newcastle, where we were already winning, but just to seal it.
Iwobi against Brighton,
Iwobi against Brighton as well. You obviously had the Muniz pulling one back at City. You had the 2 Wilson ones against Brentford. There's several goals in there.
I hadn't really thought about that. That's extraordinary.
So obviously, the reason that people put it back on us, and it's completely fair, is because a lot of the ones we've let in have been game state altering goals. For example, the equaliser at Everton, the equaliser against West Ham, the United winner, just to name a few of them that have been the most infuriating, and obviously the one at the weekend against Liverpool. We dropped a lot of points from winning positions, there's no doubt about that. What I would argue is we're taking the lead in way more games. This was not happening last season at all. We were not as free scoring. And when I say free scoring, I don't necessarily mean the amount of goals per game. We're just ensuring that we at least get one.
Exactly.
Think back to Parker in lockdown and how rare it was for us to score a goal. I know that is taking into account one of the worst goal-scoring Fulham teams ever. So obviously we're going to be better than that. But scoring at home every week is not something to take for granted. We've been playing some fantastic teams. Arsenal do not let in many. We didn't have many chances. We had 2. We scored one of them. We're clinical. We'll get more than 2 chances against Southampton, that's for sure. Watching that performance against Tottenham, a Tottenham with a makeshift defence, a Tottenham that had been in ropey form, to say the least, going into that game. The way they took them apart was just obscene. You shouldn't be that open early on against any team. And I'm not just talking about the Maddison goal. We know teams can concede early. That can happen. But nevertheless, the way that they were opened up was nothing short of a disgrace. So I really hope they play like that again on the weekend, or at least something similar to it. they do cause problems going forward. They miss a few big chances. They missed a few against Tottenham. They probably should have scored at least 1 or 2 in that game, let's face it. But I would hope that the control we can have at home of the game should limit those chances, because it seems like they need 2 or 3 big chances to score a goal at the moment.
Absolutely. I even forgetting to mention players like Joe Aribo as well. Very, very, very good midfielder. Do you know the reason why I sort of sit here, and I sat here yesterday talking about Southampton with an air of sympathy about them, an air of frustration about them as well, is because we've been here before where your season is barely halfway through and you've already turned into a meme. Your season's become a meme. And do you know how incredibly demoralizing that is as football fans who invest so much time and money and energy into watching and supporting your club, for it to have your whole season crumble before you even reach Christmas is genuinely like River Thames with bricks in my pocket sort of territory. It's so frustrating. It's so depressing. So I do really feel sorry for Southampton. But I don't want to sort of sit here and be like, well, it's Russell Martin's fault, because I do believe that the game on Sunday was a perfect encapsulation of 2 managers in Russell Martin and Postecoglou who will just, to the hill, stick to their game plan regardless of what happens. And you're seeing from both sides the consequences of that happening. Obviously, Tottenham losing incredibly silly games and Southampton losing so many silly games and conceding so many silly goals that they're so far gone they can't come back. They can still survive. They'd have to go on the most extraordinary run to do it. And I just don't back them to do it, even if they brought in Marco Silva, who would get the best out of this team. You could say Pep Guardiola, but he's just right now not having the best of time of it. Let's talk about Fulham's team. I would love, just because we're at home to Southampton does not mean we'll just play one of Lukic and Berger. Actually, we can't even do that anyway because Pereira is suspended, so to scrap that. Lukic and Berger, I think from now on, it needs to be our midfield pivot. They have really, really stepped up in terms. I can't remember 2 midfielders who I wasn't absolutely really excited about in terms of when they first joined the club in Lukic and Berger in their individual moves, but now are just such incredible assets to this team. Where I'm not genuinely, you think of a player who's made such a difference to our team and such an incredible difference to João Palhinha. I don't even think about João Palhinha anymore. He doesn't even cross my mind anymore. He's so far in the past. And I was speaking to a journalist on Saturday who basically was like, wow, Sander Berger really is sort of proving himself to be that sort of Palhinha mold of player. And I do believe that is the case. And it's so amazing how you can have a player who basically was arguably one of the best midfielders we've had in our history be so utterly forgettable 6 months on, and you've got someone in Sander Berger who's just incredibly, on paper, just not as spectacular in terms of him as a player, but his the way he's been playing in this midfield has just been incredibly impressive, and it complements Lukic so much. I genuinely get very sort of passionate and emotional talking about this team, because where these sort of players have come from and what they're doing now in this team and where we're sitting in the table, what we could be doing this season, it's incredible. So so Kenny Tete injured, which probably means he's out. So in comes Timothy Castagne. I'm absolutely 100% fine with that. I think Castagne is such a good, safe pair of hands. Robertson on the left, and I would actually stick Diop and Cuenca. I would just have the same. I wouldn't change it. Leno in goal, Berger, Lukic, Smith Rowe in the 10. We need to see more from Smith Rowe. I'm sorry. We do need to see more from him. And actually, Silva really did speak quite honestly last week about how he needs to be more consistent at this level, because he's dipping in and out of games, and that's a real, I wouldn't say worry, but it's very frustrating to see when you've got a player of his talent and he's basically showing glimpses in fits and starts. Left hand side, Iwobi. Right hand side, I'd go with Wilson again. I'm happy with Wilson to start again, and then Raul Jimenez down the middle for me. Rodrigo Muniz has now come off the bench and scored at both the Etihad and Anfield, which I think is incredibly good achievement, and that in terms of confidence is going to be huge for him. And do you know what? I made a point on Saturday night which no one in our group chat agreed with, because obviously there's a clamour to sign a new striker, but I am very pleased in the fact that Jimenez and Muniz are scoring goals, and it's not like they're not having goal droughts as such. They are making a difference to this team. So I don't think necessarily from a financial point of view where Marco Silva's made this point that we have to only sign players who are going to make a single bit of difference to this team and are better than what we already have. I don't necessarily think that in January going in to sign £20 million striker is necessarily the best thing to do. However, I can understand the point that sort of 20 goal a season striker who's going to cost that amount of money could be the difference between us getting Europe and not getting Europe. Because if Jimenez only gets another 6 or 7 for the rest of the season, and Muniz maybe another 3 or 4, that might not be enough to get Europe.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I mean, ultimately, it's great to see both of them scoring. I still do think that up front is one of the most easily upgradable positions for us. But I've been impressed by Jimenez's all-round play in addition to the goal scoring. So I see your point. I think that if we want to get Europe, we have to improve our strikers. I've got to be honest, at least one of them. Probably at this point, I'm hoping to get a new starter, just someone that is more reliable. But in January, it might be hard to find. Agree with your 11 to a T. I mean, even if Tete wasn't injured, it wouldn't have surprised me if Castagne started this one, just because we've got Southampton, Chelsea, Bournemouth in such a short space of time, the same where we had the Tottenham, Brighton and Arsenal games. But I'm expecting a good performance from whoever plays. Really want to see more from Smith Rowe. Completely agree. This is the sort of game we should be seeing him take it by the scruff of the neck and dominate between the lines, pressing them like he did against Crystal Palace, where we forced the error from Lacroix for the first goal, from interplay with Jimenez and him, the 1-2. Excited for this game. I'm feeling confident as well. I know that it doesn't always work out like this. I get that. But I'm predicting a 3-0 Fulham win. I'm feeling confident. It wouldn't surprise me if it's much tighter than that, or if there's a shock. These things happen. But I do think that if Fulham perform like we can, we will win this one comfortably.
Yeah, we seem to have similar thinking. I've had 3-0 in my head all day, really. I thought stretching it to 4 would probably be a bit unfair. But then would also back up my point where I think we can take a team to the cleaners. I think we will at some point very, very soon. But the problem is our next fixtures in Chelsea, I don't think that will happen. And Bournemouth are actually a very, very good team. So I think this is a real good chance. I think 2-0 I think 3-0 sounds about right. Okay, I get it. This either ends 3-0 Fulham or 1-0 Southampton. Really, it does. And look, Southampton really could put in on the Skybox, live on TV, their best performance of the season. They shut up shop and they get up to 8 points, and it gets the whole crowd going in terms of the away end. And suddenly there's new belief breathed into this team. I can completely understand it and completely understand where fans are coming from in terms of how they can see that game going. But I understand that if we were just a tad more inconsistent, but we're not. We're actually incredibly consistent in what we're doing this season. 4 defeats in 16 games I can't remember the last time where in the Premier League season we've reached this level of the season and had so few defeats. And again, like 2 seasons ago, where we were sat in this sort of similar position where we'd lost very few games, all those defeats have got circumstances behind it, apart from maybe Man United, where we just didn't put the ball in the back of the net. All other 3, we could have arguably won the game if Pereira had stuck away that penalty. But look, I genuinely, this has been the best start to a Premier League season in terms of watching the Premier League I've ever seen. Every game has me on every game that you can physically watch has me on the edge of my seat. Palace Brighton on Sunday, and then followed by a Manchester derby where you just did not see Man United doing that. I couldn't believe it. And obviously then Southampton, going 5-0 down within 35 minutes against Spurs, just extraordinary stuff. Really looking forward to having Saturday to watch the football and then Sunday to go and watch Fulham. It's been a monster episode, and I think we needed this because I know we haven't really managed to speak every week, and I think because of that Liverpool game, and I think we just wanted to talk Fulham today, didn't we, Joe?
Absolutely, and like you say, why not? The perfect time to do it. I mean, we've been playing so well over the last few weeks. Really, really difficult run of fixtures. And we've come out the other side. So now we need to, these points are only good. I mean, they're good in historically, but good in terms of our final league position if we back them up by winning the games that we need to win. And we missed a trick against Wolves. We need to make sure that we don't miss a trick again on Sunday. Like you say, I mean, stranger things have happened than Southampton turning up and doing us. I remember last season, I was very angry after the League Cup semi-final cup draw I predicted that we'd beat Burnley. I think it was 5-0 because I was just fuming, to be honest with you. And we'd won 5-0 a few times earlier in the season. That's the sort of thing. I'm expecting a comfortable win, and I'll be disappointed if we don't get it. But I would take any 3 points on Sunday. I've seen enough from this team to know that bad performances can happen, but they are rare. I would say that the only bad performances we've had this season are parts of the Villa game, and obviously that Wolves game. Other times there's been a couple of dips in certain halves, but nothing too substantial. Yeah, and Ipswich, and even then we could have won that game. So it was it wasn't as major as maybe some other seasons where we've had real spells where it's we can't hit the back of the net or we can't defend. We've been pretty good on both counts. We've got a positive goal difference at this stage of the season, scoring 24, letting in 22, I want to say, off the top of my head, something like that. And we could have scored more. We could have conceded less. We could have kept more clean sheets in those Everton and West Ham games for a start. But yeah, feeling really optimistic, Jack. And enjoy the game if you're going. If you're not, you're watching it on TV. It's nearly a sellout, so the tickets are nearly gone. Enjoy it. And we probably will speak one more time before Chelsea. But to those of you that maybe don't catch that episode, have a wonderful Christmas and New Year. Best time for football. And then we get into silly season, Jack.
Silly season being deadline day in terms of January, where actually it's a Friday night before Newcastle, and I don't know whether I'm going to be here or in Newcastle given the bloody train situation, which is frustrating. Thank you so much for watching today. This time last year, we were on our way to Merseyside to watch the most extraordinary game, and then we did the live stream the day after, of course, and got Liverpool, and then we played Burnley, and then that was God. That doesn't seem like a year ago. That seems like a few weeks ago. But what a year it's been. We'll review the year, and I'm sure at the end of the year. But we'll catch us again next week. Enjoy the game against Southampton. Thank you so much for watching, and we will speak again on Monday.